The following program is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Laurie Z, and my regular co-host, Storm Bradford from Mortgage Fraud Examiners, will return next week. He's going to be talking about security breaches, about securitization audits and exposing them, so I think that's going to be a key thing. And I should have a special guest on the line shortly, so I will welcome him as soon as he comes in. Today we're going to talk about identity theft, and I think that's an important topic. I come from a credit consulting background, and so there are some clues when your information has been stolen. Do I have Dave Carroll with me?
You do.
Dave Carroll, welcome to the show. You are my special co-host today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Laurie.
Thank you. And can I introduce you?
Absolutely. That would be honored.
All right. Well, you're one of my favorite people. We kind of met a few years ago when I was doing a different show, and you've been on a number of my shows. And so if you don't know who Dave Carroll is, you should Google United Breaks Guitars, because Dave kind of changed or revolutionized the way social media was used when United Airlines broke his guitar, and he decided to write a trilogy of songs after nobody would really help him. And those videos pretty much went viral, made Dave a famous keynote speaker, and he's also an incredible musician. And
it's a pleasure to be here with you again.
Thank you. And now we're going to talk about identity theft, because I know I've had that issue, and I'm here in the United States, and you are in Canada. So I don't know if everything works out the same, but maybe we could share your story of what happened.
Well, mine actually happened in a couple of levels, and I was first made aware of it when we didn't get any mail at our house about a year ago January. And we normally get something every day, but it went on for like 2 or 3 days. And so I went to the post office, and it turns out that I had made a change of address to have all of the mail at my house go to Montreal, which didn't make any sense because nobody lives in Montreal that I care about. And I found out that for 4 days, all of our house's mail had been going to a private home in Montreal, which I assume was probably an abandoned house or a house that was for sale. And it unraveled that somebody had stolen my identity. And Canada Post has a really nice, convenient option for people who are moving, that you don't have to go in person and show ID, perhaps, or you can do it all online to make it easy for you if you're changing addresses. And so somebody had enough information to satisfy Canada Post security system, and all of my mail, including my wife's mail, went to Montreal for about 4 days. And just before they had that set, they had it all timed perfectly, that they had applied for credit cards, say 2 weeks outside of that date, so that they would all start arriving at my mailbox at about the time that all my mail would be going to Montreal, before I would have a chance to figure it out, and then they could use these credit cards to commit some fraud. So it was quite widespread and complex.
Yeah, it's kind of a shocker. I think it's pretty easy in the United States also to fill out those forms. And, as a criminal to get smarter, that's what they seem to be doing, is so if you're not getting your mail, there's kind of a queue. I mean, once in a while I get a day where, maybe once a month I get no mail. But if I were to not get mail 3 days in a row, I would go, yeah, something is absolutely wrong. So in your case, did they actually get away, or did you, using the credit cards, or were you able to stop them or catch it, or what happened?
Well, they got a bunch of credit cards, the first A company, the Bank of Montreal, called about a visa, making sure that I had applied for a visa. And of course I hadn't, and so that they said I should check that out. And it was then that I also saw on the credit bureau that they provided me that that someone had paid Canada Post a $50 change of address fee. So it sort of all happened at the same time that I realized. But there was I think they applied for 10 credit cards, and ironically, even after Bank of Montreal alerted me that they'd applied, they shut it down, I still got a Bank of Montreal credit card. So it just spoke to how crazy it was. But, yeah.
That's pretty messy, because to do that, everything would have affected your credit report, all the hard inquiries, all the accounts added on. It would make it quite a mess, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm told that it didn't really affect it, maybe because I got onto it so quickly, and there's now if anyone, including myself, wants to apply for credit under my name, there's going to be a protocol that goes through, and I'll get notified, and on the cell phone on file that I've given them to verify that I am who I am and that I've applied for it. So even I can't apply for credit without being verified now.
Yeah, and I'm sort of in the same situation back in about 2010. Long story, my purse was stolen through someone I know, unfortunately, and it had, my purse had everything in it, and so they got everything they needed to go ahead and do whatever they wanted. I actually made all my phone calls within an hour to cancel everything out and, try to stop it. Unfortunately, what has happened for me over the years is I seem to automatically get new credit cards once or twice a year from my credit card companies, because once you notify them that you're a fraud victim, they actually watch out, they can usually tell in the computer, like if I'm making a purchase here in Florida and it's showing that the purchase is in other states, they go, oops, and they close it down and they send me new cards. And, it's kind of inconvenient in my case, because if you have things attached, to your cards, now every time it happens, I've got to go back in and I've got to change everything. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and I know it's meant to protect me. But here's a really bizarre story for you, Dave. Back last year, I got a strange letter in the mail from my auto insurance carrier stating that they gave me a woman's name, and that she was trying to add herself onto my auto policy here in Florida. And I thought, well, I don't know this person, but I used to rent my house out years ago. Maybe it was a tenant trying to use it. I didn't know. So I ended up calling my insurance company and telling them, do not add this person. They do not live at my house. I don't know who they are. And at that point, I had to call the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they actually mailed me a special letter that I have to carry in my car if I were ever to get pulled over, which fortunately doesn't really happen for me. But I managed to track down the person and on Facebook and send them a message saying, why are you using my my address when you now live in Texas? And she replied back, I'm only a kid. I'm like 18 years old. I don't even have a license. I don't live in Florida, and I really don't know what you're talking about. So apparently somebody knew who she was and kind of assumed her information. What's interesting now here in the United States is if you have other people living in your home, your auto insurance company knows it. Somehow their databases compare the addresses. And so I know, for my other half, for example, they list his name, I guess, on my policy because he's in the house, and they want to know, are there other drivers in the house with the keys, just for the insurance reasons. But it was kind of strange to have to deal with a situation like that, and I'm going, who's trying to add themselves onto my house? So people need to be aware when they have situations like that arise. That's sort of a red flag that something bad is happening. And so, a couple of things I wanted to talk and get your opinion on. I made up a little list here of clues that someone has stolen your information, because people, they don't always know until it's too late, and I think you have to be really aware. So you see withdrawals from your bank account that you can't explain. Now, do you know anyone who has that? Because I do.
No, I don't.
Okay. I had a family member in New York City who went to the bank, went to the ATM, went to take out money, and there was zero balance. And so what the people had done, or the criminals had done, was they had attached some type of a machine, which they also do to gas stations down here in Florida, that skims it and it picks up all their information, and then it wipes out their bank account. And one of the things, Dave, I learned was don't have all your money in one bank account because it can take weeks to get it back. If you have 2 or 3 bank accounts at different banks, it makes it a little harder. But you're going to laugh on this one. This is an old story I heard years ago where some criminal had placed next to an ATM a machine that said, swipe your ATM card here to clean it. And people actually did it. Yeah, that's like, go there and skim it and get all my information. So that's another common one. But in your case, you didn't get bills or you didn't get your mail. Not getting your mail for 3 days, you should be calling the post office, right?
Right. And so there's Canada Post system was that there's supposed to be a fail-safe where the post office is supposed to, before they start forwarding your mail, send something to your mail saying to you that your mail is about to be forwarded because you asked. If that is not the case, please let us know. But that depends on the post office doing that, and mine didn't. And I knew that I have a good relationship with the people at the post office. It's just a small little place in the village of Waverley where I live, and for whatever reason they didn't do that. And so the whole system can't be reliant on that sort of thing. I've been saying, as soon as this happened to me, I realized we're living in the age of technology. There's cameras everywhere, and there should be something that says when you come in, you have to show ID, and you have to stand and have your picture taken as the person you say you are, and have that picture that matches that ID attached to the file that says we're forwarding your mail. And then if the person's fraudulent, obviously they're showing their face, they wouldn't do that. It would curb it immediately. But nobody wants to do that. Canada Post doesn't want to do it because they're struggling now with competing with FedEx and Purolator and all these other companies. And that's a big source of revenue for them. And so they don't want to mess with that. And credit card companies are charging 25 or 29% interest, and they're making money hand over fist, and it's just a cost of doing business, and it's the consumer that gets caught in the middle.
Yeah, and that's kind of the sad part, and I agree with everything that you said. I mean, I know another thing too is if you write a check and the merchant refuses your check, because nowadays they do that automatic check thing where just automatically it's basically debit when you write a check, and so that's another issue that you can have. A big one I hear as a credit consultant is when debt collectors call you about debts that aren't yours. And so if you suddenly start getting a lot of phone calls, collection calls from debt collectors saying that it's your debt and you've never done business with the company, then that's another clue that someone's stolen your information. Now, I don't know a lot about the dark web, but I'm curious. Do you know anything about the dark web?
I'm learning about it. It's this whole nefarious little area of the internet that you can access, and you can actually put a hit out on somebody and strike a deal to have someone assassinated on the dark web.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
I don't know much. I've read about it. It makes me think of like the multiverse. Like we're in the good internet and the bad internet, and so the advancement of technology in certain ways is really good and really positive, but for the criminals, it's really bad for the rest of us. I mean, they can do whatever they want if they figure out how to get online and get your information.
Right. It's something that we have to be concerned about, and companies and credit card companies and banks need to start taking more responsibility for it to protect the consumers. And one of the spin-offs of having my own identity stolen with the whole mail thing was that several months later, after I was told everything was cool and everything was fine, I started getting calls from a collection agency on behalf of Rogers cell phone and cable company here in Canada. And they said I owed, it was a Montreal collections agency, and they said I owed something like $5,000 for not just one, but I think 2 or 3 cell phones in my name in New Brunswick, the province bordering Nova Scotia where I live. And I explained that that wasn't me, and clearly I live in Nova Scotia, and told them all the things that had happened and everything, and they still were pressuring me to solve this problem, and said I had to call Rogers, and they didn't really have that much information that they should have had, but they gave me a number, and I was not going to do it at all. I said, this is not my problem, not my debt. But I did spend the better part of the day, nonetheless, trying to get this solved, and found out, I couldn't contact the right person. When I finally did get through these layers of serpentining my way through the Rogers customer service, the person on the other end wanted my account number And I said, I never opened an account with you. She says, well, I can't give you any information without your account number. And it was just crazy. So I complained, gave them the information, and they went away. And then several months later, turns out that company sold all their collections to another company. So another company now said, well, we didn't get Dave Carroll that time, but we're going to get him now. And so they started really aggressively trying to reach out for me for Rogers Cable's debts. And I went online and I called out to Rogers on the internet and said, you're giving me your problems. You knew that, and whenever you give your bad debts away, you know that a high percentage of those are probably fraudulent, that they weren't the people that they say they are, but you're gladly just giving them to a collection agency and letting it be that customer's fault now when you're knowingly doing that. So I said, I'm going to share this story. I'm going to make a song about it, type of a thing. And they called right away, and they got involved, and they made it go away, and said, if you have any problems, let me know, and I haven't had any problems since. But it's a very shady thing going on there. Big companies are making big money on people, but they don't want to make it secure for people or take responsibility for it.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit more about that because that's called junk debt. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Have your house payments skyrocketed under an adjustable rate mortgage? Have you been laid off or had your hours cut? Are balloon payments coming due? You need help from mortgage fraud examiners. To stop the housing crisis, Congress and the White House are pinning their hopes on homeowners renegotiating their mortgages. The trouble is, the banks are saying no 80% of the time. Mortgage fraud examiners can help you get the leverage you need to turn things around. They estimate that up to 85% of all mortgages are legally deficient. Mortgage fraud examiners can perform a mortgage transaction analysis and an appraisal to find legal deficits in your mortgage. It's like CSI for your home loan. Banks and lenders suddenly start cooperating when faced with a lawsuit for violating lending laws or appraisal fraud. Find out how mortgage fraud examiners can help you. Visit Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Call 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200.
And we're back on Fraudsters Radio here with special guest Dave Carroll. I'm Laurie Z. And if you have a question you'd like to ask about identity theft, you can call in 646-668-8512. And now, Dave, you were talking about my area of expertise here, which is when you're a victim of identity theft, a legitimate one, and you had to deal with a collector who didn't want to do it, what they should have told you was you could have filed a police report and done an ID theft affidavit, could have sent that to the bureaus and to the companies that had done this to you. But one of the unfortunate things is, if you dealt with a company and they said we took care of it, you got to still check your credit reports because it's not uncommon for them to sell off that debt as junk debt for pennies on the dollar, and then you got to start the situation all over again. And the scariest part about that is it's not always immediate. It could be a year or two down the road or longer, and all of a sudden it shows up in your report, and you're going, wait, I never had an account. I already dealt with this. So if you're in a situation like Dave was, keep copies of all paperwork that you sent out so that if it appears again, then, you have something to go back to them with and say, hey, already dealt with this. You guys need to take this off. Because there are laws, I'm sure in Canada, just like in the United States, that protect you. You just have to know what they are. Now, I'm going to kind of astound you here. This is some information that I got off LifeLock, which is a protection application for people who want to lock down their credit. And the number of identity theft victims in 2017 was 16.7 million. That's humongous. And the amount stolen in billions was $16.8 billion. So it's a huge market for the criminals. And, we were talking about clues about where someone has stolen your information. Obviously, we spoke about debt collectors calling you about debts that aren't yours. One of the things I always tell people on their credit report to look at is unfamiliar accounts. Are there name variations? Are there two Social Security numbers? Make sure all the personal information that shows up on the report is actually yours. Now, interestingly, in a few weeks, we're going to have an IRS representative on an upcoming show who's going to discuss fraud in relation to tax returns, because that's a whole nother topic. Years ago, I wrote an article called Avoiding Revenge Debt. And the reason that I did it, Dave, was because I get calls from people who say, my ex-partner or my ex-spouse used all of my personal information because they had my Social Security and they have my date of birth, and they go ahead and they open up accounts, max them out, and then it becomes, literally when they go to the police, it can become a felony. And so there are some scary stories of what people who, you think it's just people that you don't know, but a lot of times it's a lot of the identity theft. It's people that you actually know. And now, have you ever had any stories like that where friends had situations like that? You must have all good friends.
I do actually have pretty good friends. I don't know anybody that's deliberately ruined someone's credit or stolen from a spouse during a breakup, but I'm sure it happens. Money is always at the center of many breakups and that sort of thing. But yeah, no.
Yeah, you're lucky then. You're lucky. I get a lot of calls like that, and that just kind of frightens me that, how do you protect your information? So one of the things here, I'm in Florida, so one of the things here in Florida is if you are a victim of identity theft and you go through, what you're supposed to do, here's a scary thing. If you register as a voter in this state, your name, your address, and your date of birth are all published online under voter registration in Florida. So what happens when you're someone like me who's had your Social Security number stolen, and by the way, the amount of almost everybody at this point has had their Social Security number stolen. So all that, and they buy them, believe it or not, for like $1 a piece. So either they're stolen, they are from deceased people, or they're from people not yet born or not assigned those numbers. So it's pretty easy for people to then match up if they're on the dark web and they're buying those. Then they match it up if your state registers all your other information. Can you imagine how easy it becomes to just continue, what's going on?
I know, it's unbelievable. It's always well-intentioned. They have the social insurance numbers here that I think were introduced in the late 60s, early 70s in Canada. And people said, we're concerned that people are going to be assigned these numbers and they'll be used for so many things. And the government said, no, we're only going to use them for income tax, I think. And, of course, now it's used for everything. And it's a gateway to help criminals.
Right, exactly. And so here's a list of some of the major types of identity theft are employment or tax-related fraud, credit card fraud. That's really common. And I've read that usually, I think the most common type is in restaurants, them using the cards. But nowadays, one of the ones that scares me, have you ever been, I guess they call it phishing, the PH phishing, on Facebook, where someone messages you and says, hey, and they pretend they're a friend of yours, and they've obviously looked at your account and done some research, and you think it's actually your friend that has been, injured somewhere, beaten up, and now wants you to give your credit card number so they can get on a plane and come home. Have you ever had that or know anybody that had that happen?
Yeah, my grandmother at some point, and they prey on seniors a lot, don't they? And,
yes, they do.
My grandmother got a call once, and it was they just started by saying, Grandma, is that you? And so she had 20 grandchildren. So it sounded like my cousin at the time, his name is Noah, so she says, Noah, is that you? And he says, yes, it is. So now he's got her believing that it's Noah, and he said that he was in jail. He needed some bail money or something like that. Could she send him a transfer? And I don't think she did. But the first reaction from people in the family when we heard that is, what's he? First of all, he's not a troublesome guy. That we were all surprised. But why would he contact Grandma to try and get some money? That's not really cool. And then we realized that wasn't even him. And
and they're so good though. They do all their research. They look up all your friends, and so my story. This is way back in I think 2009 when I first got onto Facebook. And I didn't even know what Messenger was until a box popped up. And it was a very old friend of mine who lives on the West Coast out in California. And I know he travels a lot for business. So whoever was doing this had to have looked up like his friends and read through his pages and seen that he had traveled a lot. And so it said something like, help Laurie, I am in, I think it was England or whatever country, and I've been beaten up and robbed, and all my information, is all my wallet, everything's gone, and I don't have any money, and I need to get to the embassy and, have them help me, and I don't have any money. And can you message me with your credit card information? Of course, I never do anything like that. But the funny part was the way it was written. It was written almost as if my friend had actually written it. He had to have known a lot about it. And so what I actually do is I said, okay, if this is really you, then tell me the last time we saw each other and where. And it hadn't been that long because he had come out here for a business trip. And he was like, oh, you're offending me. You're offending me. How can you believe that? It's not me. And I said, fine, give me a phone number. And I actually called a phone number in some foreign country because if it had really been him, I would have been sick if I hadn't helped. But the person that answered the phone said, oh, he just left. And I said, busted. And so I ended up calling the phone company. They gave me the money back. Meantime, I messengered my friend on the West Coast, and I said, you need to go to are you home? You need to go to your Facebook page, and then he could see the entire conversation that had showed up. And so that's how they victimized. Apparently, this person went after almost all of his friends, and fortunately didn't give everything away. But I sit here and I go, how does Facebook stop this type of security? And so a number of years ago, I did a segment with one of the TV stations down here where it was how accessible is your Facebook. Now, for you, that's got to be hard. Is your Facebook lockdown private, or is your Facebook open for everybody?
It's pretty much open for everybody on my. I've got two Facebook pages: the musician fan page and then a personal page, and both of those have over 5,000 friends or whatever. But I'm careful about what I put on Facebook. I share stories about my family, but there was somebody impersonating Dave Carroll once. And he didn't really commit a crime because he didn't spell the name exactly like me, but he had my picture up there, and he never said he was a musician, or he said he was a musician, I think, but he didn't say he was the same musician as I am. But I got these angry emails from not at the same time, but from a woman in Italy saying, "Caught basically I caught you, and I see you have a family and children, and you were supposed to come and be with me in Italy," that type of thing. And she actually messaged my wife to out me and that sort of thing.
Oh my gosh! People do such crazy, stupid stuff.
I know. Another time, that I'm a speaker. I've spoken in 31 countries around the world about United Breaks guitars now, and it's not uncommon. It happens all the time that somebody in a different country will email me or reach out to me and say, "We'd like to have you at our event. We're having this event here. It's going to have this many people. Here's the hotel and all this stuff, and we'd like you to come speak." And you decide on a fee, and you send a contract and all that stuff. And I got a request to go to South Africa to a congress. There was going to be some sort of event, and Desmond Tutu was supposed to be there as one of the speakers, and they asked if I would like to go, and didn't quabble on the fee, which was great, and business class airfare on long trips is not uncommon, so they offered that, gave me the choice of dates and everything, and here's the venue, and it just, for some reason, I just looked it up, something about what they said, and sure enough, it was a scam. And the way to the scam was, all of that was to try and get about $800 out of me, and they wanted me to send $800 to Johannesburg to Western Union for something, and that's a major red flag, right? Who would ever do that? But that's when I sort of realized this isn't a real gig, and sure enough, exposed the scam. But it had different levels. They said they would have somebody contacting me, and different level. There were 3 levels of people that were helping me. It was all very authentic.
Well, yeah, it's scary because they actually it seems so real, and you can't tell nowadays what's real and not. But we are going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, more about identity theft, and we're also going to talk about some remedies.
Great.
Have your house payments skyrocketed under an adjustable rate mortgage? Have you been laid off or had your hours cut? Are balloon payments coming due? You need help from mortgage fraud examiners. To stop the housing crisis, Congress and the White House are pinning their hopes on homeowners renegotiating their mortgages. The trouble is, the banks are saying no 80% of the time. Mortgage fraud examiners can help you get the leverage you need to turn things around. They estimate that up to 85% of all mortgages are legally deficient. Mortgage fraud examiners can perform a mortgage transaction analysis and an appraisal to find legal deficits in your mortgage. It's like CSI for your home loan. Banks and lenders suddenly start cooperating when faced with a lawsuit for violating lending laws or appraisal fraud. Find out how mortgage fraud examiners can help you. Visit Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Call 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200.
And we're back on Fraudsters Radio. I'm Laurie Z here with special guest Dave Carroll, and we've been talking about identity theft. And, you know, when we talk about computers, now, I don't know about you. I'm not a techie type person, so I actually have a service, and they can go in remotely and, you know, fix my computer if something's wrong. But now these companies are going in and stealing data and stealing identity. So here's kind of a scary story for you. I'm not going to give the name of the company because my company is really good, and they're based out of Delaware, but their people are in India. And so when I call, it's actually being transferred to India, where they help you fix your computer. They basically go in and they fix it, and I trust them. And so I'm very cautious, having been a victim of identity theft, with what happens. So now, try this on for size. I was driving in my car, and I got this phone call that said, you know, hey, this is Laurie from the name of the company, and it's urgent that you get in front of your computer right now because there's a problem. And I'm like, well, I'm in my car right now. I'll call when I get home. But what I noticed, what was odd, is I don't usually pick up calls that aren't programmed into my phone. And so it was a different number. And so when I got home, I called my company, and they said, it's not us. And I went, okay, who is it? You know, and they said, well, another company, one of our employees left the company, stole all of the information on all of the accounts, on all the people, and now they're operating under the same name, don't know where. They call from multiple different numbers, and they're using the same names of the same people that actually work at the legitimate company. And since they are from India and they all have, you know, a fairly heavy accent, sometimes it's hard to recognize the voice. But they did the same thing to my mom, who has an account with them also. And so they say, hey, it's an emergency. And so what my company says is, oh, no, it has to be from our phone number. They even got a phone number 1 digit off, an 800 number that's 1 digit off. And so what they tried to do was go in and call people up and say, hey, we're renewing the contract, and we need your credit card information. And so they're getting smarter and smarter by using the company, and they sound just like you with your thing in South Africa. They sound so legitimate, but there was something in your gut, right, that said, something just isn't. It's too easy, right? It's too easy. Something doesn't seem right.
Yeah, anytime that anybody calls you on the phone and they want money from you for anything, that's a major red flag for me. Like, no client asking me to speak would ever ask me to send them money. It would only go the other way. Or you book your own plane tickets, I guess, or that sort of thing. But this other scenario, though, that's dangerous as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to share one more scary story with you. This one actually happened to my mom and stepdad in New York City, and it goes back to only a few years. But their financial advisor, apparently, most financial advisors back up to the cloud, but at this time they backed up to a CD. And so they call my mom and my stepdad call me up and they go, oh my God, we just got a call from our financial advisor. The CD he sent in with all of our personal information, all of our account numbers on our IRAs, everything like that, stocks, bonds, whatever. The envelope got to the company. It was opened and there was no CD. And I said, well, were you the only ones on there? And they go, no, 400 other people. So they didn't back up to the cloud. Now you've got a disk someone stole with information, personal information on 400 people. And so the remedy in that situation, because a lot of times the banks will say, well, just change your password. I don't think that's good enough. So I made my poor parents go to, each bank where they had a bank account and actually close out the account and then reopen new accounts and do the same thing on all of these retirement funds that they had, because the passwords are fairly easy to get a lot of times. And do you know what people mostly use as their password?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, for numbers maybe, but for most people, they use their pet's name. Yeah, they use their pet's name, and so that's a lot of times how they're able to figure it out. So if they can get into your social media, you're a celebrity. People are, they look on your page. You're kind of open as to what it is. I don't know if you've ever had a problem with Facebook itself. Me, I keep everything shut down and private, because if I don't know you, I'm not going to allow you onto my page because I've already been a victim.
Right. Yeah, I've had that one experience where that person was kind of impersonating me, and for the most part, it wasn't a huge deal, except they started using pictures of my kids on their profile.
Oh, jeez.
That was a little freaky.
Yeah, I was going to say that would have to be kind of scary. Now, I don't know in Canada. I know down here we have a lot of security breaches with companies, that are hacked. I think Equifax recently had that. There are people, once the information is out there, it's like permanently out there. You can't really recall it back. And so that's another situation. Can you think of any other ones offhand that I'm missing?
Well, the one thing I was going to tell a quick story too about when you get called on the phone and it's from apparently it's from India, it sounds like, and they're talking about the Microsoft Windows problem that you're experiencing, and we only have Macs here at the house, so that's always, I know exactly that it's a lie every time they call, because they're telling me they can identify my problem with my Windows, and I don't have a Windows computer. And I've heard that in India there are places that have like a legitimate call center set up where they have hundreds of people working the phones fraudulently, and you wonder how that can happen, but apparently that's happening over there. And so that's something that we might want to look into, getting the Indian government to shut down.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll happen. That's a good idea. The latest one down here, and it happened to me 3 times, where I got 10 calls on each of those 3 days from a call center, from someone with a foreign accent, who said, and it was the same speech every time, and I think it was almost the same woman every time, calling from different numbers, saying, "Hi, Laurie Z, you have won a $9,000 grant from the U.S. Treasury Department. We're calling you from the U.S. Treasury Department, and this is a windfall, and you don't have to pay it back." And I just had to laugh hysterically. I had to laugh hysterically. I actually played with them each time on the phone, just as sort of a form of entertainment, because I knew it was fake. But then I have a friend on Facebook who someone took over her Messenger account and started messaging me about the same exact thing, and how I had to call this number to claim my $9,000 windfall. Now, the person my friend that has this account, she is in her 90s. She probably doesn't even know how to use Messenger. I had to cancel them out on Messenger. I'm going, these people don't give up. It's like they get your name, and then all of a sudden you're on the scam list throughout probably the dark web, which is where they try to get you. So what I want to try to do a little bit here, we're going to have a commercial break in about 5 minutes, but I want to talk about some of the remedies. So now in your case, did you have to go file a police report? Like, what were the details of what you had to do?
Yeah, I filed a police report, and then I had to contact, there's 2 credit agencies here in Canada, Equifax and TransUnion. You have to notify them both individually, and they put a flag on your credit report that means what I had said earlier, that they have to call you anytime anyone is applying for credit under your name, assuming it's you. They check that every time. So I'll never get another credit card assigned to my name without somebody calling me first. And that should apply to any type of credit.
Okay. Now, the same thing here, which I usually work with a client. When I work with a client, the first thing I make them do is to call. We have the 3 credit bureaus: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, which I guess you don't have in Canada. But you have to call the credit bureau. What they do is you can place a temporary fraud alert on your credit files for 90 days. And, list your cell phone number, obviously, so that if anyone does anything. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make, and I'm going to ask you this, how often do you look at your credit report?
Well, hardly ever. I think in the last year probably twice because I had problems.
Yep. And so I find I do it a lot more just to see, what's happening. Is anyone trying to do anything? Because putting fraud alerts on your file, it's effective about 99% of the time, but there is always that 1% of the time that somehow somebody manages to get through. So, there are services like LifeLock that will help you. Here, you can place a security freeze on your credit reports also, and some of the bureaus, they may charge or may not, depending upon the situation. Here's the hardest part in Florida. In Florida, if you're going to do an ID theft affidavit, the police departments, they don't want to actually give you a police report, which I find unbelievable, but it's true. And so I have a lot of clients that do that in order to do the ID theft affidavit. It's asking for the police information, and you can certainly try to resolve it without doing that. However, the credit bureaus can say, we're not going to honor it because you didn't get a police report. But it places you in a conundrum because if you're trying to get that police report and the police say, oh, no, we don't deal with that, then you have to go to another police station and try again until you can get one that maybe will do like a miscellaneous items type of report. But it's not helpful if the police are not giving you really what you need is a report number. So you kind of have to be insistent, bring a copy of your police report, your photo ID, who you are, maybe a copy of your Social Security number so they know who you are, and then try and do it that way. But to me, that's a major problem down here. We talked a little bit before about how if you are a victim, you can cancel out and open up new bank accounts, open bank accounts that are new, not just change your password. Financial institutions, credit unions, that kind of thing. Now, another type of identity theft comes through the Social Security Administration, where people, obviously steal the Social Security numbers. Now, here's another statistic for you, Dave, because I like statistics. In the United States, 1 in 7 people have a duplicate Social Security number. And
wow.
So I find that odd because I don't really know at this point. We'll have to have someone from Social Security on what they do. But 2 people have different names and the same number. That's got to be a pretty big problem. But if you think you're a victim of Social Security fraud, you can call their hotline at 800-269-0271. It's very difficult to change your Social Security number, and it's also kind of a pain in the butt, to go through changing it on everything else also. One of the things people do on credit reports, and this you may not have heard of, is what's called a CPN. It's a credit privacy number. And so there are companies that sell these CPNs to people who have bad credit because what they want to do is make a second or segregated file so that you, Dave Carroll, would actually have a second file that's all good credit. And unfortunately, here in the United States, it is a felony. It's illegal. And what they do is they make the CPN look like a 9-digit number, which is the amount of digits in a Social Security number or an EIA business number here. So there's a lot going on. I do want to go to a commercial break. We do want to talk more about remedies when we come right back.
Have your house payments skyrocketed under an adjustable rate mortgage? Have you been laid off or had your hours cut? Are balloon payments coming due? You need help from mortgage fraud examiners. To stop the housing crisis, Congress and the White House are pinning their hopes on homeowners renegotiating their mortgages. The trouble is, the banks are saying no 80% of the time. Mortgage fraud examiners can help you get the leverage you need to turn things around. They estimate that up to 85% of all mortgages are legally deficient. Mortgage fraud examiners can perform a mortgage transaction analysis and an appraisal to find legal deficits in your mortgage. It's like CSI for your home loan. Banks and lenders suddenly start cooperating when faced with a lawsuit for violating lending laws or appraisal fraud. Find out how mortgage fraud examiners can help you. Visit Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Call 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200.
And we're back on Fraudsters Radio. This is Laurie Z, special guest Dave Carroll. And so we've been talking about ID theft remedies, locking your Facebook down to private, which is hard for you, to do because your situation is different as a celebrity. I restrict social media down to people I know. And one of the things I find is when, I don't know if you look, but when someone friend requests me, the way I'm set up is it has to be friend of a friend. But somehow some of these people get through, and so what I actually do is I look. Did you ever look at anyone who did this to you and find out that they have no other friends? They have zero friends?
Yeah, whenever I accept friends, even like I've got 5,000 on Facebook on my personal page, and most of those were in the last few years. But now I don't accept any friends if they, first of all, don't have any information. Sometimes it'll be like this person wants to be your friend, but there's no photos, no personal identification stuff where they live. I don't know. They just get declined right away. And then I will look them up a little bit. And if on their photos they just got a random collage of things, I would call that fake as well. There's no rhyme or reason or personality to it. It's just random. I probably I decline those. And then, of course, there's, for a while, I haven't seen it much lately, but for a while I was getting inundated with beautiful women in bikinis who wanted to be my friend, and I'd like to think every woman in a bikini wants to be my friend, but I knew better. You look it up, and I don't know why they're calling me, but yeah.
You got on their list somehow, and they just pass you along to all the other people or whoever the fraudster is.
Well, it's hilarious, right? You get these beautiful women in bikinis, and they want to be your friend, and then you look at their friend list, and it's every one of their friends is like a over 40 out of shape guy with a bad selfie, and so I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah, well, it's probably not even a beautiful woman. It's probably one of those guys that's actually doing it.
It's not those girls. Definitely not.
Oh, too funny. So some more tips here, some more remedies here. You heard about my situation earlier with someone trying to get on my license. You might actually have to, if you're a victim, get a new driver's license and notify your insurance company. Notify, obviously, your utility companies. That happened to you. Someone was able to open up stuff. And here in the United States, we have the Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov. I don't know, in Canada you said you have something else, correct, where people can notify?
Just the TransUnion, the police, and the two credit bureaus are the people that I understand that you have to contact, and that's about it.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, regarding your credit report, because a lot of people don't know, they'll look at their credit report, and they will see other people's names or variations, addresses they didn't live at, maybe another Social Security number. But a lot of times, believe it or not, it's actually not identity theft in that if they're not getting the phone calls or the letters from collections. And so what happens on the credit end of it is the credit bureaus, when they pull your name and social, there's probably a lot of Dave Carrolls, and what they do is they search for similar information. So just a quick story. I had a client many years ago with a fairly common name, and he lived next door in an apartment complex to a guy with the same last name, and they were not related. And both of their credit reports had each other's information on it. So it's not uncommon for people who are junior, senior. But one of the worst stories I had was a client who had, again, a common name, but she had a different middle initial at the bottom of the report. They list name variations. And this woman was trying to buy a house, had never bought a house before. And she had 10 foreclosures on her credit report. And I was able to track down who the other woman was in Miami. It turned out she was in jail for equity stripping. She would go out, buy houses at the top of the market back, in the early 2000s, strip out the equity, and she ended up going to jail, which had nothing to do with my client. But it is actually handled as an identity theft type case with the credit bureaus because they won't necessarily admit it. So I think, if you're stuck and you try things like your state representatives to help you, otherwise you got to find a lawyer, which is a lot of money. And a lot of people don't have the money to do that. But I think some of the biggest tips here are if you're proactive and you watch what's going on your credit report, or if you're watching those emails, like I'll tell my mom, hey, if something just doesn't seem right, delete it. And if it's from like a pop-up box on the computer, she had something happen yesterday like that from some company, and somehow it looked like they got into the computer, even though there was malware. And I don't know a lot, like I said, about that, but I think with malware, it protects you to a certain point until the bad people figure out a way around it, right?
Yes. Well, when it comes to remedies, like we're talking in the show about all the things that you should check off the list when this happens to you, things you should proactively do. But one thing we're not really talking about that I think gets swept under the carpet because we've been conditioned to believe it's just the way it is, that the system is that credit card companies give away the credit for free at first, get everybody. You can be a university student and get 10 credit cards and you're 18 years old. And then fraudsters get in the middle of it, and then the consumers are forced to assume the responsibility for all of that. But what if we started looking at the companies who are giving away the credit and saying, you have a responsibility to make sure when you give a phone away under Dave Carroll's name, for instance, you know that the person there, that you've done more than just the basic limited thing of asking for an ID, and if they happen to have a fake driver's license that they got somehow, that they're off the hook. I say, I don't believe that, and that's exactly what I did. When I was in the middle of my problem with Rogers, I didn't accept that it was my responsibility. I said, this is Rogers' responsibility because they let somebody have what they should have done is had the person stand in front of a camera when they say they're Dave Carroll and have their picture taken, and then that would eliminate probably 80%, 90%. But companies aren't asked or forced to do that because they're making so much money by letting a few, 10, 15, 20% of the people being fraudulent, they could probably still make money at those levels. And if we started saying as consumers, you're negligent and how you're protecting me in today's world, you can take a photo, you can verify someone with a face and match it to some ID, have that on record, and if you don't do it, maybe you should be paying me $5,000 every time I have to pick up a phone and call Equifax or TransUnion, and you'd watch the rates would go down exponentially.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. But how would one of the things, too, Facebook has the facial recognition. So, but assuming your Facebook page is real, it's how do you determine anything is real online anymore? So if you want to get a credit card, sure, they could look at your website, but your Facebook page. But in your case, they were looking at their own Dave Carroll.
Yeah, but I'm saying we're assuming that everything has to be done online, and I'm saying with something as important as changing your address with Canada Post or getting a credit card, you should have to go to a bank in person, and then you can have free money anytime you want and pay your bills and all that stuff, but you got to show up in person to stand in front of a camera when you're saying you're somebody to get the card. That's security. Like, are we that lazy that when our own credit bureau and everything that all these things that we're trying to avoid that we just listed today, we can do away with that if we just get off the couch and go to Canada Post and fill out the form, or go to a bank and say, I need maybe 2, 3 credit cards. I don't need 10. I just need 2 or 3. And start being more responsible.
It would, but like you said, the banks make so much money. Listen, the credit bureaus make so much money that even when they're sued under the Fair Credit Reporting Act here in the United States, even if somebody has a lawyer, and they do pay out millions of dollars a year in lawsuits, but probably because they're making billions of dollars a year. So it's like a drop in the hat for them to harm people. But they can so seriously harm people that they can't get any credit, and where that can kill it is, let's say they're applying for a home, which is what I deal with, people who are trying to buy a home, and then I have to send you to a lawyer because the credit bureau won't accept the identity theft affidavit for whatever reason they choose. And then the client is like, oh, my God, now they actually have to go to a lawyer because they have financial damages. But you're right, it would be a lot simpler if people would just go in person. And people will scream ACLU, but what about doing things like fingerprint, a fingerprint on your credit card? I mean, every time you go remember when the credit cards switched from the magnetic and now they're at the chip? And so you go, okay, how long until they outsmart the chip? And one of the other stories was how people, you might be, let's just say at Walmart, and they have you swipe your card, or they used to punch in your debit number, for example. People can buy machines that they carry in their pocket, and somehow, I guess, when they look at it after you've punched in your code, the machine tells you the warmth of the 4 digits that you hit, so they can tell how hot each of the digits are on their machine, and then it tells them I sit here and I go, how can these people buy these machines? Like, where are they buying these machines that they can go ahead and do this? So I think kind of the final message is you as a consumer, you have to protect yourself from identity theft, but you have to know what to do if you become a victim. But if you don't check your credit reports, or you don't call the post office, and it's a federal crime to steal mail, I don't know if in your case they got the people. If you're unaware of these things, that's not good. And where it's scary to me is when you have elderly people that are victimized, and most states actually have stronger laws to protect people like that.
Yeah, I don't think that's the other thing. When it comes to credit card fraud, or mail fraud, the police don't do anything. They don't. I gave them the address. I did the investigative work. I was in Edmonton once, and I showed up with an expired driver's license but a valid credit card, and my brother was with me, and you have to have a valid license and the credit card. So neither one of us had the two pieces together, and finally I had this credit card that I'd never used before, so in my wallet. So I activated that card for this one rental, a thrifty car rental in Edmonton, and we were good to go. And then, sure enough, the next 2-3 days later, someone had gone to the West Edmonton Mall, stayed at an expensive hotel, and put hundreds of dollars on that credit card, and they showed a photocopy of my credit card. And the only place they could have got that was at thrifty car rental. Somebody in there took the scan. That was the only time that card had ever been seen. So we know exactly where it was, but they never went after them. And, it's just they write it off. So you don't have any cooperation with the law enforcement, even if you do all the work for them. It's just so easy for big organized crime. It's free money
to do it. Yeah. It's funny. I have on one of my credit cards, they actually allow me to put my photo. So that in itself is ID. But people outsmart people nowadays. But I think we've given our listeners some great ideas on the bad stuff, what to look out for, and also what can you do. But I think you have to be proactive. I think that's sort of the key message, because you don't want the stuff happening to you, but you kind of know how you can resolve things if it happens. But it's a lot of work, like you said. It's a lot of work when it happens to you.
Music video. It's the only way to go.
I'm waiting for your next one. Are you coming up with any more? Every time I see United Airlines, Dave, I send you, it's 12 o'clock at night, and I go, another United Airlines story. Person got thrown off a plane, or they had a dog got thrown off a plane. I'm going, send to Dave Carroll. Send to Dave Carroll. Where's the song?
I have to say that they lost my bag in Florida last week, but they actually recovered pretty well, all things considered, and so I have to give them a thumbs up for how they handled the what was not a comfortable situation.
Yeah, did they know it was you, or did you say, hey, I'm going to do a fourth song now?
They did know it was me, and I might have got a little bit different treatment, but there were elements of their customer service now that are better for everybody. If you don't have to say the same thing over and over again to a different person. So it sounds like they're getting their act together a little bit.
That's good. You made a great change for them. And I want to thank you so much for being my special co-host. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, Laurie. I'm honored.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us on Fraudsters Radio. Please join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we want to hear your stories, and you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page.
At
Have your house payments skyrocketed under an adjustable rate mortgage? Have you been laid off or had your hours cut? Are balloon payments coming due? You need help from mortgage fraud examiners. To stop the housing crisis, Congress and the White House are pinning their hopes on homeowners renegotiating their mortgages. The trouble is, the banks are saying no 80% of the time. Mortgage fraud examiners can help you get the leverage you need to turn things around. They estimate that up to 85% of all mortgages are legally deficient. Mortgage fraud examiners can perform a mortgage transaction analysis and an appraisal to find legal deficits in your mortgage. It's like CSI for your home loan. Banks and lenders suddenly start cooperating when faced with a lawsuit for violating lending laws or appraisal fraud. Find out how mortgage fraud examiners can help you. Visit Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Call 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200.